What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the Sword and Shield era. We're also going to touch on the Sun and Moon era, and we will also start with PokeBeach's article about some exclusive English specialty set coming January 30th. They don't know the name yet. It's probably going to feature Mega Dragonite EX and then also these Mega Attack cards. So I guess that'll be interesting. I feel like we've been spoiled over the past couple of years when it comes to specialty sets. You got your 151, your Paldean Fades, Prismatic Evolutions, even Black Bolt, White Flare are very enjoyable sets. So hopefully Pokemon continues that trend. Now, to touch on Sun and Moon era a little bit, because I did the update in the spreadsheet yesterday, you guys can go look at all the numbers. It definitely wasn't good news if you own a lot of Sun and Moon era stuff still. There's been a massive pullback in sales volume across the board, not just on certain sets, basically on every single set. We're seeing a pullback in the amount of boxes moving. That said, it doesn't seem like prices are continuing to move down. They've kind of stabilized. For example, Team Up, I think you're fairly close to like $8,000 right now, maybe $7,500 to $8,000 if we want to be a little bit conservative. Unified Minds, Unbroken Bonds, these are still fairly close to like that 2,200 range. I think at the highs, Unified Minds, we were pushing maybe 3.2K. Unbroken was probably up to like 2.7, 2.8. So they definitely pulled back a little bit. Cosmic Eclipse is sitting around 3.7, 3.8 currently. And again, this was fairly close to, I think, 5K at its high. So Sun and Moon era boxes have been hit pretty hard, and there's just not a ton of them moving anymore. I think part of that does have to do now with Probstein not being on eBay. They've actually moved to their own website or whatever, and they were the ones that sold a lot of the boxes. So it's going to be interesting moving forward with these more expensive booster boxes, what people decide to do. I know a lot of people sent stuff to Probstein because they had a lot lower fees, so you'd get paid out a lot more for them. I know some people had bad experiences with them too, so maybe there's going to be other consignment services that take over that, or maybe people just sell their boxes individually. Either way, it'll be an interesting thing to see. Now, moving into the Sword and Shield era, I think there was actually some promising signs this week in the Sword and Shield era. A couple of the boxes were up in terms of market price. For example, Sword and Shield base, we're now sitting around $543 on TCG Player. Rebel Clash, we're up to $418. So these were a couple of the sets that were moving up in price. But the main thing I want to draw your attention to is the amount of inventory listed for a lot of these boxes was not more than last week. And if it was, it wasn't that much more. And I think that's important because it kind of shows that the people that were worried about the crash, things pulling back in price, a lot of them have already listed their product for sale or gotten rid of their product. And we're kind of seeing a slowdown in the amount of people coming to market. But the other thing that you should be pointing to is sales volume, because if people aren't buying the product, that could be a worrying sign. I've heard some people in my comment section and on other videos saying that they went to a couple shows over the weekend and a lot of singles were still moving, but sealed product, it was very difficult to move. And I'm not saying that we're at like the middle of summer when we're at peak boom in Sword and Shield era. We're not at those numbers in terms of sales volume, but we did see an uptick this week in a lot of the top alternate art sets. So things like Darkness Ablaze, Vivid Voltage. I think Darkness was actually up in terms of sales volume, almost double what it was last week. And again, they fluctuate on a week-to-week basis. Vivid Voltage was down, whatever. I think Battle Styles was fairly similar to what it was. Same thing with Chilling Reign. But there was a fairly large uptick in the amount of Fusion Strike as well as Lost Origin that was moving by it now, eBay North America this week. And it kind of makes sense. I mean, when you go to eBay and you look at a set like Lost Origin, I think there's one box listed at like $660 currently that has really bad rap. And then it jumps up to, I think, like $725. But when this box was around $850, $860 at its peak, now it's at $725. The question becomes, at what point are people going to start picking these up again? And if this week was any indication of what's to come, a lot of these other sets were going to see that sales volume increase once they hit that like 15-20% reduction in price. So Brilliant Stars at like 400 and let's say 40-ish dollars. Same thing with Silver Tempest, getting close to 400. I think there was actually a listing for Silver. A new seller put up a case, I believe, at like 375 USD. And it was the same thing with Brilliant Stars. I think there was another new seller too, a different new seller that put up a case at like maybe $390. Like it was sub $400, I believe, for a few boxes. Now, that's only just one seller. I think that most of those boxes are probably going to sell this week. But you can see why when people look at a set like Brilliant Stars or Silver Tempest being sub $400 on the secondary market for something that's, 2 generations removed now, because we're in the mega block. Scarlet and Violet era is done, and then Sword and Shield era was before that. It does seem like a decent deal, especially considering a lot of people assume that these are all going to be $1,000 plus one day, with the top sets like Lost Origin and Fusion Strike maybe being like $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, and then Evolving Skies obviously topping all of those, maybe being a little bit higher, potentially even reaching team up levels of $10,000. And again, we've talked about this for months on the channel now, even before it was very popular amongst a lot of people in this hobby. And it's that investors are continuing to be more selective with the investments that they're buying. That's why things like Evolving Skies, Fusion Strike, Lost Origin, even though they are more expensive, they do tend to sell at a higher volume than a lot of these other boxes like Rebel Clash, Vivid Voltage, even Battle Styles at this point. I know people say it's only $270 currently. You can actually find boxes listed for as low as like $230 on eBay, I believe, but there just isn't anything crazy in these. And there's a lot more supply out there for something like Battle Styles or Vivid Voltage compared to some of these other sets like Brilliant Stars, Chilling Reign, etc. Now, if you guys are curious what's happening with a lot of the top alternate art cards from the Sword and Shield era, it's kind of all over the place. I do think that most of them are trending downwards. For example, the Moonbryon TCG Player Graph says it's around $2,230 currently, but if you come in here and look, most recent sale from today, $1,800 in a near mint copy. Before that, you had a $1,900 near mint sale on the 2nd, and another one at $1,550 on November 2nd as well. If you go look at the Gengar, this is one that's kind of all over the place. For example, 2 days ago on the 3rd, you had 4 sales at $841.89. But then the day before that, you had a near mint copy sale at $650. So some of them a little bit more hectic compared to the other top cards. One more example I brought up here too, the Rayquaza, sitting around $690 on TCG Player, but the most recent sale, 3 sold yesterday at $636. There was a light played that sold at $560, and then you had another near mint at $712 on the 2nd. So we're definitely not at all-time highs on a lot of these cards, and maybe it'll be this month or next month or maybe even the month after that before these start to trend upwards again. But it's going to be the same question, right? At what point are investors going to start buying these up? Because it's not like the product has changed. The only things that are changing are the market price and the consumer perspective on the product. So if you guys have any input on that, when you think things will change for some of these eras, like the Sword and Shield era, Sun and Moon era, etc., feel free to leave your comments down below. If you got some value out of this, I'd really appreciate it if you leave a like, subscribe to the channel. It does help out a ton. Also, if you are shopping eBay, TCG Player, Hobbiesville, I do have affiliate links down below. They're free and easy to use. All you have to do is click on the link before you do your shopping. I'll get a small percentage of the sale at no extra cost to you, so it's a free and easy way to support the channel. But with all that said, thank you so much for watching the video. Stay safe wherever you are in the world, and I'll catch you in the next one.